Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Rob Lux. Rob is the co-chief executive officer and chief operating officer of Cenlar, the United States' leading loan subservicing provider. In this role, Rob's responsible for Cenlar's operations and technology, business development, client management, human resources, legal, corporate communications, and marketing. He joined Cenlar in 2017 as the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, and was appointed EVP and COO in 2019. Prior to his time at Cenlar, Rob was the Chief Information Officer of Freddie Mac for 7 years, where he was responsible for all of information technology. I look forward to hearing more about Rob's journey from CIO to co-CEO, his vision for the future of Cenlar, and the advantages he believes there are as a CEO with a technical background, among other topics we might cover together. Rob, welcome back to Technovation. It's always great to speak with you.
Thank you, Peter. Great to speak with you.
Excellent. Well, Rob, for those who may be less familiar with Cenlar, I provided the briefest of introductions to the company. Provide a little more detail, if you would, as to the business you all are in.
Yeah, sure, Peter. So Cenlar is a privately owned wholesale bank, and we're the nation's leading mortgage subservicer. So what that means is we service mortgages where we provide all the administrative functions related to a homeowner's mortgage. That includes sending statements, processing payments, handling the escrows if they have them, and escrows cover the insurance and taxes on that property. So Cenlar has over 100 clients made up mainly of banks, credit unions, and other financial institutions of all sizes. And we work directly with homeowners on behalf of our clients, and we manage over 2 million loans.
That's a great overview. Thank you for that. And I mentioned at the outset, you're a co-chief executive officer. Not always are CEOs paired with other CEOs.
Right.
Talk a bit about that relationship and how you've what you've carved off versus your peer and what he has done.
Well, so I'm the co-CEO. The other co-CEO and the president is Jim Daras. So I'm the junior partner in the relationship. Jim's a great guy. Jim's grown up in banking. He has significant banking experience from Chase and Dime and a number of other institutions. And as I said at the outset, Cenlar is a bank. So Jim basically he's responsible for all the financial stuff, including like FP&A, financial plan and analysis, accounting, bank operations, treasury. But he's also responsible for risk and audit. Jim, all in addition to having all that banking background, was also formerly our chief risk officer at one point. So, and just to give you some further background, we both have very big shoes to fill. Our predecessor, Greg Tornquist, he just retired this past summer. Greg was with Cenlar for 35 years and just had a long history of success. So, we owe a lot to Greg here at Cenlar, and Jim and I are doing our best to fill those shoes.
Very interesting. And you and we've known each other for a while, and you've been a technology executive multiple times over. I mentioned the prior post before Cenlar as CIO of Freddie Mac. You came over to Cenlar as Chief Information Officer. I know for you it was kind of a goal, a dream to be a Chief Information Officer. And I wonder now in the post that you have with the responsibilities I listed off a moment ago, what you see is some of the advantages of being a technologist in a role like yours currently.
Yeah, I actually aspired my whole career to be a CIO, and I was lucky enough to achieve that goal a while back, as you mentioned. But as a CIO, you get to view the entire business instead of just pieces of it. You get to see it from front to back. You get to understand what the issues are in terms of the business processes and some of the pain points for the business. It's very similar to how CFOs are able to see all parts that contribute to the overall business, which is probably why so many CFOs in the past were promoted to CEO. In today's world, especially in financial services, the industry I'm in, technology plays such a key role. A lot of CEOs I've worked for have said we're really a technology company masquerading as a financial services provider. So those financial services companies need to leverage technology to digitize their businesses and provide consumers with the experience they've become accustomed to. Those one-click interactions versus having to go through a litany of paperwork. So coming up the ranks of technology has really helped me learn to identify areas where we can deploy technology to enable the business. For example, when the pandemic started in early 2020, March of 2020 to be specific, our call center, it was inundated with calls, obviously. So we had to train and add hundreds of additional agents, but it really didn't stem the situation. It really didn't improve our response times to those callers. But in the meantime, we actually deployed in early 21 a completely new call center technology platform, and we were able to transform that call center into now where it's one of the best performing in the industry. So by giving those agents better tools to do their jobs, we're actually able to significantly improve the customer, the consumer experience with a lot fewer agents, actually. So, and we've also deployed a wide variety of digital tools to provide the homeowners with information so they don't need to call us. So that's just like an example of, how getting that knowledge of the business and understanding how to combine technology with the business to enable digital experience, it just really helps. It really helps significantly.
Yeah, and I mentioned also great examples. By the way, I really appreciate you bringing that to life to a greater extent. Also, I mentioned also at the outset, Rob, that your post between your current one and your original one with the company was a COO, a set of responsibilities you continue to have. Talk a bit about that jump, if you would. There have been a number of technologists who've had operations experiences or have grown into COO roles. Talk about the logic of that step or that progression, if you will.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I really didn't aspire to move out of my CIO role, but like events kind of overtook me. So I came to Cenlar to focus strictly on IT, but it allowed me to learn a lot about Cenlar's business end to end, as well as gaining an understanding of what our clients' needs were and those of the consumers, the homeowners. So when I started here, instead of sitting in the executive office with the the CFO and the CEO and so on, I wanted to sit with the servicing operations team over, and it was in a different building. But that now allowed me to naturally absorb what they do and get a better feel for the business and what their challenges were. So when the former COO departed, I kind of guess I was the obvious choice because I had kind of an end-to-end understanding of both the business and how technology could enable the business. Frankly, for those old enough or no history, I felt a bit like Harry Truman must have felt when FDR passed away. Right, I was kind of thrown into the role a bit, and I had never been a COO, so I really had to lean heavily on the former CEO Greg and other leaders here, and they provided enormous help and supported me during the sometimes painful transition. They helped me learn about the business where I didn't really understand certain things. They helped me make the best decisions possible. So, and it's not done. I'm still learning every day, and I enjoy that. And like a former CIO once said to me, "When you're done learning, you're done." Right. So I feel like every day I keep learning, and it helps with the progression. And whatever my title is, that's your job, is to learn and to apply those learnings to strengthen your business.
That's a great advice for anyone, certainly as their career progresses. I wanted to also ask you. You and I have talked a bit about the importance of developing a strong relationship with the board. And I wonder, as somebody who's had reason to interact with and influence a number of boards now, what are some of the things that you believe to be some of the most important factors in so doing?
Well, the thing I always want to be close to the board and keep in touch with them and make sure that there's transparency and open lines of communication, because you need to gain the confidence and support of your board. If you lose that, or if there's question there, you're going to have a lot of issues. So at both here Cenlar and prior to this, the first thing I did was create a board technology group. I asked board directors if they'd be willing to be part of this informal group where we'd meet and discuss things like, key projects, what's going on with cybersecurity, looking at some of the performance metrics of IT, what are the things we're working on, just technology subjects. And at both places that I've done this, that's evolved into what is a formal board technology committee. We've got one here now. It's chaired by one of our board directors. Our chairman is on that technology committee, and it's now a formal thing where they go through and they make sure that we're discussing technology related matters. Back to financial services companies, technology is a key. So you need to make sure that you're talking about things that are transforming the organization, but also some of the things that you're doing to defend the organization against cybersecurity threats and other threats that are out there. So I highly recommend getting a few board directors, building those relationships with them, both inside and outside of board meetings. And then, at least for me, having a board technology group where you meet on a regular basis has significantly helped.
Well, speaking of technology, you now have another person who runs technology as Chief Information Officer, Steve Taylor. I wonder if you could take a moment and describe your relationship with him. It must be unusual in as much as he has a predecessor still with the organization. I remember actually way back when in your time in Freddie Mac, we were at a conference together, and you used to joke that every new CIO, the first thing that almost their responsibility to do is to talk about the mess they've been left by a predecessor. Well, in Steve's case, his predecessor is still in the building, and so he probably isn't quite at as much liberty, perhaps, to to do
the three rules, right? Blame your predecessor, reorg, and then put together 3 envelopes for your successor, right?
Yeah.
He's not averse to blaming his predecessor. So that's, he's a great guy. And he's also a great CIO. And Steve's been a longtime friend. I met Steve way back in the early 2000s when we were both at GMAC Mortgage. He worked for GMAC as an employee. I was with EDS, Electronic Data Systems, now part of HP, which GMAC outsourced all their IT to EDS. So we got to know each other. And it was about in 90 days after I started at Cenlar, I put together my 90-day plan. I looked at my observations, and Steve was in town, so I asked him to swing by, just kind of look at my initial observations and add his own. And he provided some great insights that I totally missed. And so I kept in touch with Steve since that time. This was back around circa 2018. And when the opportunity presented itself, I was lucky enough to convince Steve to come work here. And I rely on Steve to build a great team. I think he had herded some really great people. He's brought in some other great people, and also to get things done. And he's great at both those things. He really is great as far as a leader for a team, and then getting stuff done with that team is paramount. And he's really, really adept at both. Plus, I like the way Steve is always thinking a few moves ahead. He sets that vision with the team, and he commits to our operating committee and our board, and then he just goes and executes. So just to give you some examples, under Steve's leadership, we've migrated all of our technology to the cloud. We are probably one of the few banks that could say that we are all in on the cloud. And we have a handful of things that are still sitting in our hosted data center, but that journey to the cloud has helped us now get the ability to raise the game in terms of the tools that are available to us around, like we talked about, security and other things. We've just really significantly improved our foundation by being there. And then also, just as a former CIO, I'm very empathetic to the challenges that a CIO has to endure. But Steve's been very successful at leveraging technology to enhance, Cenlar for both our clients and their homeowners and our employees. So I really don't, I don't have much to have to defend him or protect him, because he's done such a great job.
Well, what a luxurious situation that you've got that shared history, but also shared set of responsibilities in this organization, where you no doubt have an ability to speak at a level that perhaps you didn't have with predecessors who you reported to when you were a chief information officer. I wanted to also ask you, Rob, as you look to the future, what trends excite you? What are some of the things that are beginning to make their way onto your roadmap?
Well, it's not on Cenlar's roadmap per se. I'm kind of speaking for Rob right now in terms of when
Okay.
you say what excites me for the future.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, you're gonna laugh. I really think this Bitcoin thing that Satoshi Nakamoto described in that white paper is really exciting. I know people are like, are you out of your mind? It's probably too exciting in the recent months for cryptocurrency speculators. But I really think that blockchain and distributed ledger technology has great promise. I mean, it's for digitizing peer-to-peer transactions. I'll give you an example, Peter. This weekend, I had to get some documents processed for my mother, and so we both had to drive to a notary. We had to both provide them with proofs of identity. Then we both had to wet sign the documents so that the notary could, take out a stamp and stamp it that we're good. And I was kind of like, how long has this been around? So I went back and I looked it up, and it's been around like since prior to actually 1300. In London, it started around the 1300s. And I'm kind of surprised they didn't have a Gutenberg press in that notarization office, right? So to me, like not blockchain, it could and should eliminate this practice where because it has the ability to provide immutable evidence that both parties participating in a transaction are valid and that the transaction is properly recorded. It's an immutable transaction. You know, the fact that we have to still do this in this day and age is kind of nuts. So I think it has, and I'm not talking about remote online notarization where you basically do the same thing, but you do it over like video. I'm talking about using distributed ledger technology for things like this. So while I don't own any cryptocurrency and I wouldn't recommend it as an investment, I absolutely see that the foundation it's built on having a place in the future in terms of enabling transactions between parties, like the one I described, right? So, I just think that is something that's an emerging technology that obviously is in the trough of disillusionment, as Gartner would say, but I definitely think it's going to have a place in the future. Do you want to? I mean, I can go into some others that in
Please.
terms of, yeah,
Yeah.
obviously artificial intelligence, machine learning, they're growing in power every year. When way back in the Stone Ages, when I started in technology, there was this program you can Google it. It probably still's out there somewhere. ELIZA, and it simulated like an analyst, a psychologist, talking to you. You type in phrases, and it would respond to you with things like, "Well, very interesting. Tell me more." Right? And it was pretty slick. It was cute, but it was just a bunch of canned phrases that were pumped into this program to interact with you. Well, these days machines are becoming more perceptive and subtle in what they can do versus just parroting random phrases. So in financial services, we're using this technology to interact with consumers. We've got a chat bot, which actually it wasn't recommended by Steve or me. Actually, I was kind of the Luddite who was like, who would ever interact with a bot? In the midst of the pandemic, Lou Sigillo, who runs our contact center, was like, oh, I've had experience with bots when I was at Verizon. I think we should put a chat bot out there. And we've done it, and it's been unbelievable in terms of the uptake. I was like totally wrong. It basically so 85% of the folks that interact with that chatbot never punch through to an agent. And their satisfaction on the survey, the post-chat survey, is over 95%. So they are using this to self-serve. It runs 24/7. It's just been like an outstanding example of how we can use, and we're constantly training that bot to learn more about our business. We're going into tax season now, end of year. People are going to want their 1098s and tax statements. So we're training the bot to answer those questions if someone wants to interact with them versus having to deal with a phone call. They can just punch up our bot and deal with it and get their 1098 without having any muss or fuss. So I think that's just one component, obviously, of AI ML. There's a lot more sophisticated ones related to data mining and so on. But just to give you an example of how we're using it to basically get borrowers the information, the homeowners the information they need without having to interact directly with us.
A great examples all. Thank you so much, Rob, for sharing those. I wanted to also ask you, as someone now who's been a CIO multiple times over, a COO, a CEO, as you reflect on your career journey, clearly one of the things that has benefited you is being a lifelong learner, as you pointed out. You didn't rest on the laurels of the degrees you have in either undergrad or graduate degrees. Rest on the laurels of accomplishments, at one stage of your journey, but rather continue to strive to learn along the way. I wonder if there are other things you would call out as difference makers for you on your pathway to bigger sets of responsibilities. What else comes to mind, Rob?
Well, a lot of times when you talk about, transforming anything, people go to the three things of people, process, and technology. And you focus on those three areas when you want to transform and grow. And if I were to weight those three items, I'd say at least 80%. I'd put 80% of the weighting to people, right? If you get the right people, we've talked about Steve, I mentioned Lou, we've got a great team here at Cenlar. And, to me, if you hire the right talent and you give them the resources they need to succeed, and then you do exception processing, you help them remove roadblocks that may occur, but you kind of get out of their way and let them do their jobs. That's when the magic happens. And so I would really say that the secret to as much success as I've had over my career is due to the people who've been gracious enough to be on my team during that time. It's really all about the people.
Well, great insights. Rob Lux, thank you so much for joining me today, sharing a bit about your career path, the interesting things you and the team are doing at Cenlar, the progression from one stage of your career to the next, and certainly some good advice for others who I'm sure would hope to wish to follow in your footsteps in one way, shape, or form. But as always, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate it.